Jai Guru. Om Mangalam Gurudevaya Devye Matriksha Mangalam Mangalam Bhakta Brindevyo Sarvalokaya Mangalam Om Stapakaya Chidharmasya Sarvadharmasvarupine Avatar Varishtaya Ramakrishnaya Mangalam Om Stapakaya Chidharmasya Sarvadharmasvarupine Avatar Varishtaya Ramakrishnaya Mangalam Om Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Deva Maheshwara Gurureva Param Brahman Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Om Sarashiva Samarambam Shankarachara Majamam Kashmarachara Prayantam Bande Gurum Param Param Om Bhadrakali Namo Nityam Saraswati Namo Namaha Veda Viranga Vedanta Vidyastana Evacha Sri Ganesha Sharada Guru Bhyo Namahari Om Jai Ma Jai Ma Jai Ma. Happy to be with you all again. Continuing our discussions on the Devi Gita from the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam. The last few sessions we've been, the Devi has appeared, Bhuvaneshwari Devi has appeared to the assembled devas, the assembled gods, on the lofty peak of the Himalayas, and headed by the Himalaya, the foremost of them, the spokesperson for the gods will be the Himalayas as we move forward. And they have done thousands of years of tapasya. They've gotten, and she's appeared to them. First, she appeared as a pillar of light. Then she appeared in this beautiful form of Bhuvaneshwari Devi, and they became overwhelmed and choked with ecstasy. They pulled themselves together and began to praise her using primarily the words of the scriptures. So, as we mentioned, the first section, the first 5 verses of that prayer, where it was from the Rig Veda and the Atharva Veda, and the Devi Upanishad, beautiful verses. Some of those verses have found their way into the Devi Mahatmyam as well, the Chandi, connecting the goddess with the Vedic tradition as a Vedic goddess, giving her a Vedic pedigree, and showing that the Devi Gita is a Vedic text, which is also the claim at the very beginning of the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam is a equivalent to the Vedas or Vedic text, as is stated up front in the first opening verses of the whole 18,000 verses. Then last week we read 2 verses that use primarily, with several verses, but the primary verse that was to me the most important, using the language of classical Vedanta, Advaita, the Advaitic language of classical Vedanta, with some of the arguments of what we would consider the school of Advaita Vedanta. And so when I say classic, when I say the language of Vedanta, it can be done, we can say 2 things. We can say it's that the philosophy of non-dualism as taught by Shankara and his followers, right? So that's and they definitely use some of that language, right? The idea of the superimposition, how we see a world, but is there a world when there's only Brahman? You know, that the idea of seeing a snake, when you see a rope, you see a snake, but actually it was always a rope. So that the classic argument of Advaita Vedanta, the latest school of Advaita Vedanta, Shankara school of Advaita Vedanta. But I think it's also using some of that language and kind of setting this up, using that language, but presenting a philosophy that's a little different, right? Obviously, to shock the text, it's going to be a different philosophy, right? But it's going to be using, and the Devi herself is going to be using classical Vedantic arguments and teachings as she moves forward, as she begins to speak. Right now, the gods are still speaking, but as she begins to speak, she's also going to present non-dual Vedanta. But it's not, like I said, not exactly the non-dualism Shankara in that school, but it's a non-dualism of textual Vedanta. I mean, Vedic Vedanta. Maybe we can use that. Maybe there's a better word for this, but I'm using the word Vedic Vedanta, which is a Vedanta intrinsic in the Upanishads. It's using Upanishadic language, right? I'm not sure. This is embarrassing that I don't know that. I'm not sure if the snake rope is actually is in the Upanishads or it's in later Vedanta, later Advaitic commentators. Whether they've used it or whether it's in Upanishads themselves, I don't remember, to be honest. But today's verses are going to be using verses that are in fact in the Upanishads, and used in a way. These verses have been understood, specifically a Mahavakya, Tat Tvam Asi Mahavakya, these great non-dualistic utterances, these great sayings that are in the Upanishads. Consider the essential revelations, statements of the highest truth as per the Upanishad. That's what I'm understanding of the Upanishad. So this it's using that language, but I think it's using it in a way that's more organic to the Upanishads themselves and less attached to the commentary on the Upanishads that's arguing for a harsh interpretation, a particular view, trying to find in the Upanishads a particular philosophical view, or trying to make, we can that may be also happening. I think it's also happening. It is probably also happening, making the Upanishads conform to a particular philosophical view. So Swami Vivekananda very much argues to let the text speak for themselves, right, without bringing trying to interpret everything to mean something, to mean what you already understood it to mean. So this is a view of Advaita, of non-dualism, that I think is closer to the text, what the text would present before the heavy-handed polemical schools of Vedanta start hashing it out and arguing it. So let's just up into the verses. Durga. So let's see here. This I've been trying to find new pictures of Bhubaneswari Devi, and I'm running out of pictures. Eventually they're going to be recycled, or reuse them, because we have 700 verses and we're 51 in. Right, this particular one is of a batik, a beautiful batik of Bhubaneswari Devi. I found online. It's not ours, but I don't know the author. I mean the artist. This is batik art. I think it looks like a Bengali style. Very beautiful. But especially here, I want to show images of Ma to us to remember the poetical, dramatic scene that we're in. The gods are praying these highly philosophical verses, right, about the nature of the goddess, whom they're seeing. Right, this is who they're looking. They just became over. First, they saw an infinite pillar of light without beginning or end, shining like 10,000 suns, cooling like 10,000 moons, tinged with the color of 10,000 bolts of lightning. So that's what they experienced. They became overwhelmed, and she revealed herself in a beautiful form of a goddess, as the supreme goddess in this text, Bhubaneswari Devi, the ruler of the universe. Bhubaneswari means she who is the ruler of the universe, right? The sovereign of the universe, right? So they're having a major revelatory spiritual experience. And so these verses have to be interpreted in that light, right? So that's why I've been making sure that I try to include as many pictures as I can of her to not to forget, because even I get excited about verses, are talking, making connections with other texts, and forgetting. I myself lose track of the primary scene. So let's see. Let me see. I have the verses a little more cleaned up. Numastat-padālakṣyārthāṃ, cide-kara-sarūpiṇīm. akhaṇḍānanda-rūpāṃ tam veda-tātparya-bhūmikām. Please forgive me, Ma, if I mispronounce these beautiful mantras. Numastat-padālakṣyārthāṃ. There's some Sandhi going on here that's changing the words. We have to pull it apart a little bit. It's namaha, as far as I can figure out, and Swamiji help me. Namaha tat. So we bow, namaha, right? And you can't see so much in the namastat, the tat, padalakṣyārthāṃ. Padalakṣyārthāṃ, right? He's translated it as actually, he's put it in the, actually I've split it a little wrong. It should, represented by the word tat, should be in the bottom part, should be in the upper part of the verse. And it goes with the first half. I split it in my copying for the graphic. I split it incorrectly, right? He translates this padalakṣyārthāṃ as represented, right? And it means like that. It's like indicated, Lakṣyārthāṃ is like an indirect meaning. It's one of the definitions of it. And so you can see actually there's a way that we have to, the Devi herself later in the text will say that this Mahavakya, the Mahavakya going to be discussed as Tat Tvam Asi, has to be understood indirectly, right? So there may be a play on that too, but it generally means, indirect meaning means it represents or is represented. I think represented a good word. His definition is good. Indicated, represented by what? So we worship, we bow to you, right? Who is indicated or who is represented by the word tat, right? And in Tat Tvam Asi, many of you have heard this term. If you're not familiar, this is a Mahavakya. And each of the four Vedas has Upanishads, and in each of the four Vedas, there is a line in one of the Upanishads that is considered a great saying, Mahavakya, right? From the non-dualistic Vedantic schools, right? This is one of them, is Tat Tvam Asi. So in that, I'll tell you what it means. Tat means that, right? Tvam means you. Sometimes translated as thou, has a nice sound to it, but you indicates, so tat is that, and the other, pointing to something other, something specific. You can put a capital T now because that is representing Brahman generally, right? And the tat tvam is you, that's you, our students here, right? And asi means is, right? Or are, right? So it means that you are, right? Or that art thou. Usually it's translated thou art that, but it's actually thou art, maybe even better, right? As far as the word. So that thou art, or thou art that. So this is a radical statement of identity between two entities. And it's in a one sense, it doesn't make sense. There's a classical way to understand how it does, why it doesn't make sense, and what it does make sense if you understand it properly. There's the classical exegesis of these verses, which the Devi herself in chapter 4 will give us. I'll read from those at the end of our class, right? To understand how to make sense, because what it's saying, it seems illogical. That is the thing that's other than you, and you is you, right? That seems at the surface level to be a contradiction, right? And it is at a surface section. Thou and that are opposites. Subject and object are different, right? Like this. Anyway, so namustut. So we bow to you, right? And here it's her, to her, or I mean, we can make it direct, but I think it says we bow to her, who is indicated by the word tat, by that, right? And then it says cide-kara-sarūpiṇīm. So actually, when we first read it, I typed it out as Svarūpiṇī, because that's very common. Cide-kara-sarūpiṇīm is the ones whose name, and these verses have the word Swarupa. We've read the word Swarupa 3-4 times this last couple of weeks, right? One's nature, one's essential nature, one whose form is, or one's own. So it's common, but it's a Sarupa, as far as I understand, right? Sarupa means like resembling, right? But it means it could also mean like identity or embodiment. It's not dissimilar to Swarupa, just a slightly different word. I stumbled on it. I almost missed it. Tāmavāsthā-traya-sākṣiṇīm. I did miss it. Tāmavāsthā-traya-sākṣiṇīm. Sarūpiṇī, not Svarūpiṇī, right? So who's we bow to you, indicated, who are the one indicated by the word tat, that, in the Vedic dictum, not said here, thou art that, you are that, right? Right. And who's of the nature of, the essential nature of, cide-kara means consciousness, right? Nescience. I'm tripping up myself. Consciousness, awareness, thought, consciousness, right? So we have, so who's being glorified here? So this is a statement about that in the classical verse, Tat Tvam Asi, the Tat is usually refers to Brahman, right? And Brahman, the highest reality understood in the Upanishads, presented in the Upanishads, right? The essential nature of everything, usually considered as Nirgun Brahman, right? Beyond form, beyond name, like this, right? The supreme ground of being. We can use those type of language, right? So thou, you, O Ma, who is nicely pictured here, right, are that. You're the one that's the that, and the thou art that. You are the one that's Brahman. What is the nature of Brahman? Also from the Upanishads, we have this idea, we get this term, that Brahman is, in one sense, nothing can be said about Brahman. But if we were to say something about Brahman, we could say it is Satchitananda. Oh, let's say that. The Upanishads say about Brahman that it can be, what can be said about it is that it is Satchitananda. Sat means being or existence, right? Beingness itself. Chit or chid is awareness or consciousness, and Ananda, bliss. Essential nature is blissful. So we bow to you, the Brahman, that is that, and the thou art that, right? What's the nature of that Brahman? Chidkara. Part of its nature is, or an aspect of its nature is that it's awareness or consciousness. The next line says, akhaṇḍānanda, right? Ananda, bliss. Akhanda, unending, undiminished. I think he translated it as undiminished, right? Akhanda means unending, without eternal, right? Never ending. Akhanda. Akhaṇḍānanda-rūpāṃ. So you're another aspect of Brahman, of the that and the thou art that, is Ananda, unending, eternal, unchanging. Maybe unchanging, not the right word, but we can start with unending, right? Undiminishing, bliss, right? So already we have a classical definition of Brahman as Satchitananda. At least here, consciousness and bliss. Of course, there has to be something or someone that's conscious and blissful, right? So the chit is the sat is implied, right? So who is the that? It is Brahman. Who is the that? Here it is the goddess, Bhuvaneshwari, right? And who exactly are we is a good question, right? The argument's going to be made in these verses, right? These two verses, that we are also, because remember, thou and the thou, the that, the Brahman, and the thou, the us, the you, the me, right, is also going to be identical. So how are we Satchitananda, right? But actually, in classical Vedantic understanding and contemplation, we're also Satchitananda in our essential nature, right? There's a verse that this verse has been very exciting for me. I discovered it only a few years ago because Swami Atmarupananda, many of you know him from the Vedanta Society. I think he's now in Europe and in France. He's been moved, but he used to be locally here. Very nice. I mean, he did a translation of a small Advaitic text called the Advaita Makaranda, and verse 2 of that text has a beautiful. I should have made it a graphic, but I'll tell you it to me it's very it shows how we are also of the nature of Satchitananda by own experience. Then we don't have to believe it. The scripture says it, and we should believe the scripture. That makes us Ashtika. We're followers of the Vedic tradition. We accept the Vedas as like revealing and verifying metaphysical truths about things beyond our immediate experience, right? Beyond sense experience. So we should accept it, that we are Satchitananda, that Brahman is Satchitananda, and we are essentially Bhajanananda. But we also already have experience of this. Even if we may have doubt, and our mind not be pure enough to illuminate enough that our experience transforms us. But we also have this experience. This verse describes that. It says, Aham asmi sadabhami sadachi na amaha priyaha brahmaevaham atam atasmitam Satchitananda-Lakṣyārthāṃ. Okay, I printed my notes too small, so I'm having a hard time reading them. Aham asmi. I am. We all have this experience of our existence. We exist. We can't deny our existence, right? We exist, right? And then it says sadhabami. I'm always shining. Means awareness. I'm conscious, right? We don't have to count on the scriptures for this. If I'm quoting a scriptural verse, right, or a philosophical verse at least, right? We don't have to be convinced of it. We have to notice our own experience. We exist. We are conscious of our existence, right? And we shine. We're aware. Our existence and our awareness, our existence and our consciousness are inseparable. They're connected. Our existence is the one that's shining, right? So that is already 2 points, sat and chit. We exist and we are aware. We exist and we shine forth, right? And then it says, kadachi na amaha priyaha, and never am I not dear. Na priyaha. I'm never not beloved. Of course, we can get into psychological trips and end up having low self-esteem, and that's a different thing, right? But actually, we are beloved to ourselves. Our self is beloved. It's our essential experience, right? And so that's the ananda in this verse, right? So our own experience is we exist, we shine, and we're always beloved, right? So that is said to be. It says, Brahmaevaham atmasa. Therefore, I am only Brahman and nothing else. Brahmaevaham atam smitam Satchitananda-Lakṣyārthāṃ, of the nature of Satchitananda, right? So I'm known by this. I exist, always I shine, never am I not there. Therefore, I am only Brahman, of the nature of existence, consciousness, and bliss. Right. So this is our experience, right? What the things that are said about Brahman in the Upanishads and in the Vedantic tradition, right? That very thing is our own experience, right? Of course, Brahman is akhaṇḍānanda, and it's maybe never covered by illusion, and is also one and not dual, and we seem to be separate little individuals, and so we're Satchitananda, but we seem to be Satchitananda plus something else. And that's actually what these verses will say. We're Satchitananda plus something else. That something else is also Satchitananda. So it's very mysterious how it works. So numastat-padālakṣyārthāṃ cide-kara-sarūpiṇīm. We glorify her whose essence is pure consciousness. Akhaṇḍānanda-rūpāṃ, represented by, in the last verse, represented by the word tat. Akhaṇḍānanda-rūpāṃ, whose nature is undiminished bliss. And then this is a beautiful line. Tam veda-tātparya-bhūmikām. Veda-tātparya-bhūmikām is one line, right? Of course, tam, I'm mispronouncing it, long A, means her, right? So the next line, this veda-tātparya-bhūmikām, is going to refer to her, right? And who's her? This is undiminished, right? So what is referring to her? The Veda, the Vedas, right? And Tat-parya, the intent, what that was the goal or the aimed at. And then Bhūmikām, he doesn't translate, he does, but he doesn't translate Bhūmikām, right? As the ground, right? We get Bhumi from this idea, right? Even Bhuvaneshwari, we get the word Bhuvaneshwari from the same sonic root, right? Bhumi, she's a goddess of the earth, a goddess of everything, right? Let's over here. So maybe veda-tātparya-bhūmikām refers to the Devi, and it says she is the ground indicated by the Vedas. He's translated it is she whom the Vedas refer to as their goal. She is the goal of the Vedas, but she's the ground. That bhūmikām, I think, is important. Maybe we're misreading it. This is because bhūmikām has several meanings, some of which don't seem to fit this at all, right? This is what we've trying to meditate on. What is this? That beautiful line, veda-tātparya-bhūmikām mean. She is the ground referred to as the goal of the Vedas. She's she is the ground indicated by the Vedas. Right. What is that ground? That ground is a Brahman, who's the ground of being, the ground of existence. It's a ground, but it's a ground of all existence, right? And it's and of course the by Vedas here, the Vedas are complicated and varied, right? And contradictory. Of course, schools generally don't think they're contradictory, but by the Vedas here, when you see Vedas here, read Vedanta, read Upanishad. Right, so this is the ground of being described in the Upanishads, right, as the goal of the Upanishads, right? So she is that Brahman, the ground of being that's in the Vedas, right? That refers to her, right? So let's see. She is the Tat in Tat Tvam Asi, right? And that beautiful ending, bhūmikām, has that rhyming with, I mean, there's a sonic meaning of the last verse we read. Let's see where it's back here. In the last week's verse, numastat-tabhyāṃ bhuvaneshwarīṃ, right? Oh, goddess Bhuvaneshwari. So the one who's Bhuvaneshwari is also the ground of being, the ground of existence, the reality mentioned in the Vedas itself, revealed in the Vedas. Let's go on to the next verse. So she is Tat. She is that Brahman whose nature is consciousness and unending, undiminished bliss. And if we've noticed if we care to notice, an argument can be made that we are also of the nature of existence, consciousness, and bliss. All right, it's our own experience. The next verse, pañca-koṣā-tiriktāṃ, tāmavāsthā-traya-sākṣiṇīm. punas-tvam-pada-lakṣyārthāṃ, pratyagātma-svarūpiṇīm. So again, it's using Vedantic and specifically Upanishadic examples. So it says pañca-koṣā-tiriktāṃ. Pancha means 5, kosha are the sheaths or the coverings, right? And then tiriktāṃ means to transcend or to cross, right? Cross over or to transcend. So she's the one that transcends or is beyond or is crosses over the 5 koshas. So it's here. So the 5 koshas are mentioned. We've mentioned them in our classes in the subtle anatomy. We spent a lot of time on the 5 koshas, right? And we use them in a way probably not exactly intended in the Upanishad, right? But this is how they've been used in the kind of the yogic, tantric, subtle body kind of idea that we have the 5 koshas. Remind you, those who taken the know about it and taken the class. Those who haven't, the 5 koshas, the idea that actually it's in the Taittiriya Upanishad, Taittiriya Upanishad, right? Tongue is tripping. Reveals like this. It says that there's the outermost sheath around the self, right? Around the Atman is the Annamaya kosha, that which is made of food, Anna. And so that is our physical body. What we eat makes this body, right? Right. Then within that, if I get the order right in my mind, is pranamaya kosha, which is the pranic sheath, full of life energy, vitality, vital energy, the breath and vital energy sheath. Within that is the Annamaya kosha, pranamaya kosha, manomaya kosha, the mental body, right? The mental sheath. Within that is the vijnanamaya kosha, right? That of wisdom or knowledge. It's a more refined consciousness state. And then anandamaya kosha, the bliss body, right? And beyond those, right? We sometimes think, oh, these are what we're made out of. So within those, we have the self, right? But the Upanishad says beyond those, we are the self, right? These five is what we make up what we think what we are. When we say we're not the body, right? We're saying we're the Atman, not the body. We think we're the body. We may think we're the body, and that is a mistake according to Upanishad, right? We think we're the body. We identify with the body, but correctly, what we are is independent of the body, beyond the body, transcendental to the body. We may think within the body. That's once again not exactly correct, but beyond the body, transcendent to the body. Or we say, oh, we're not the mind, right? So that's another. We're not the mind. We're not the prana. We can keep going subtler and subtler. And so that's where we get this, maybe you've heard this term, not neti, not this, not this. From the same Upanishad describes, they're the five koshas, and we're not them. Neti, right? We now use neti. It's like, oh, we're not anything we think, we're not that, we reject like that. But it's done very, very, very simply, right? The five koshas, we're not the five koshas. So we can ask, who's not the five koshas? We're not the five. The Upanishad says we're not the five koshas, right? And Brahman is not the five koshas. But here it says, you, O Devi, right? O Bhuvaneshwari, you're beyond the five koshas. You're the one that's beyond the five koshas. So if we're beyond the five koshas, and Brahman's beyond the five koshas, and Devi is the one that's beyond the five koshas, that means Devi is both Brahman and ourselves. This is the arguments being laid out, right? Next line, the next idea says, Traya-sākṣiṇīm, Traya-sākṣiṇīm. I'm sorry, avastha-traya-sākṣiṇīm. Avastha, yeah. Where is it? So it says tam avastha-traya-sākṣiṇīm. Due to the sandhya, it says tam avastha-traya-sākṣiṇīm. So tam, her, right? Again, this is directing who's the goal here, who's the focus of this prayer, who's the subject. It's her, the goddess, right? You are also beyond the three states. This avastha is a state of consciousness. So we've mentioned these three states, these three states, actually part of a list of four, right? Last week we talked about the what they call, what is it, the chaturpada Brahma, right? The four sections, or the four aspects, or the 4 feet, of 4-part Brahman, right? And what are those? There's a waking state, right? The what is it? The my eyes are not good, and I wrote it down. I wrote them too small. Vaishvana, the waking state, the Taijasa, the dreaming state, Prajna, the deep sleep state. These are the waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep. These are the 3 states mentioned. And you are the one beyond it. That means you are the Chaturthi, or the Turiya, the 4th state, right? The one that's beyond or transcends the 3 states, right? Using the same language of the last verse, right? But it says you're Shakshini. You are the Shakshi, the witness of the 3 states. Who's the witness of the 3 states? We are taught that we are the witness of our 3 states. We are not we see the external world. We see during waking state. We see our internal world during dream state, right? And then we're plunged in darkness, but in blissful darkness during deep sleep, right? It's our own experiences, right? So we're the witness of the 3 states, right? But this verse is saying, oh, you, O Devi, are the witness of the 3 states, right? And the Turiya state is considered also the nature of Brahman. So Brahman is the nature of the witness of the 3 states. We, the individual, are the witness of the 3 states. But this verse is saying, oh, you, O Devi, Tam, are the witness of the 3 states. Let's go back to the verse here. Punas-tvam-pada-lakṣyārthāṃ. You are known. Where is it here? Puna, so punaha, that, punaha, we have we have that word, where is it, in one of our prayers, Sharadam Jananim Sharadam Devim Ramakrishna Gatgurum Parapadme Teyosa Paramami Puna Punaha. We bow again and again and again. So the word punaha means again. Punas, here is punaha, it means again. So it's much like we would say, like, oh, and again you're like this. It also means you're also like this. We have that idiom in English. We do like or like this, and again you're like this, right? It's not like again, like after the first time, again in time, but again as you're also like this. So you're also, right? Tvam, you are tvam-pada-lakṣyārthāṃ. You're also the one indicated by the word tvam, you. So in this verse, in Tat Tvam Asi, the you is you. I'm pointing at my little list because I have a little line of people's faces here. I'm pointing to all of you. You, right? The one indicated by the word you, and the one that you points to, which is all of you, is her. Also, it's also her, right? Pratyagātma, my tongue isn't working here. Pratyagātma. 3 days of no sleep has jumbled my brain a little bit more than usual. Pratyagātma. Pratyaga means each or individual. Atman means soul. So this pratyagātma is a term used in Vedanta to be very similar. It has not similar, identical to the way we would use jivatma, the individual soul. The pratyagātma is also the same thing. So you are svarūpiṇī, the form of the individual soul, indicated by the word tvam. Right. So transcending, you're the one who transcends the 5 sheaths, the 5 koshas. You are the one who witnesses the 3 states of consciousness, waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep. Right. You are the one that is whose nature, who appears as, or who is the essence of the individual soul, the jivatman. Right. Indicated by the word tvam. You are tat, that. Brahman, who is nature of Satchitananda, right? Unending bliss and consciousness. You are the tvam, you are the individual soul, whose nature is the individual soul, right? Who transcends the 5 sheaths and who transcends or who witnesses the 3 states of consciousness. So this is classic Vedantic discussion, right? Given from the Upanishads. These are almost direct quotes from the Upanishads. Like my help also. I think in our commentary, like by C. Mackenzie Brown's, I think either in the commentary or maybe in one of the notes, he quotes from verse 125 of the Viveka-Chudamani, the crest jewel of discrimination, attributed to Shankara, at least in Shankara's early tradition, in the line of Shankara for sure, if not by him, most likely not by him directly. But there's a line that says, there is a certain eternal substratum of the ego consciousness, witness of the 3 states, different from the 5 sheaths. So that's, once again, this is classic Vedantic language. There is something, a substratum beyond the ego, beyond the mind, beyond waking, dreaming, and sleep, beyond the body, the prana, the mind, like the 5 koshas, like that. That is the topic being discussed. That is here in this verse. The gods are saying, you, O Bhuvaneshwari, you, O goddess, are that. You are that, and you are, we would say, it's interesting, the guru would say, in the classic Mahavakyas, the guru says, thou art that, Tat Tvam Asi, right? The gods are almost saying, thou art that to the goddess, right? You are but they're saying a little bit more cosmically, you are the Brahman, and you are the Jiva, right? So when we say, thou art that, you are that, when the guru says that, my guru used to say it all the time. That was a very common thing in the middle of every lecture, that he'd say something about God or about Brahman. He said, thou art that. thou art that. That was a very common refrain for him. He was a classic Vedantist in the Upanishadic sense, right? Not with a lot of arguments, but from his own experience. Your innermost, he'd say, your innermost self is not different from that. He'd clarify, the interesting clarification. Thou art that. Your innermost self is not different from that. Very interesting. I'm just remembering now his language. We have a recording of him on YouTube if you want to hear the Guru Purnima message, where you can hear him in his own voice say exactly that. Many years ago, before he passed, at a Guru Purnima, his last Guru Purnima. Of course, he said it before he passed. But I meant is that we recorded the Guru Purnima, his last Guru Purnima, some small discussions that he pravachan that he gave. He said, "Thou art thou. Your innermost self is not different from that." So the Guru will say that to you, right? To me, you, the individual, are not different from that Brahman. But this is a realization. Now, this is a dawning realization in the mind of the Devas, right? That the you, O Ma, are not different from Brahman and from the Jiva. We've added another character, the goddess. The God, O goddess, you are Brahman and you are Jiva. Usually the Guru says, you, O Jiva, are none different from Brahman in your sensual nature. But we're saying, the gods here are saying, you, O goddess, are Brahman and Jiva, and individual. She is Tvam, Jiva, she is Tat, Brahman. Right. So let's look, actually, let's think about that. Actually, this is quite an amazing statement. Right, and there's different schools of Vedanta that take these verses, this realization, this revelation from the Upanishads differently. Right, there's like what I would call the harsh school of Advaita Vedanta of Shankara and his followers. Right, that takes this very powerfully, that there's only Brahman, and the Jiva is nothing but Brahman, but therefore that actually no Jiva is only Brahman, and the Jiva is not really there. Right, the Jiva is a mistake. Right, where does the mistake come from? It comes from Maya. Where does Maya come from? Don't ask this question. There's an answer, but it's not an easy answer. Better not to ask such questions, right? That's a harsh perspective. Others would say, we perhaps in the Shakta tradition, we take these verses, these ideas in a different way, that the one who is Brahman also becomes Jiva and becomes Jagat. This is a classical line, description of like a tantric Shakta perspective, a Vedic tantric Shakta perspective, non-dual tantra. Let's say that the one being, right, the one reality, Brahman, right, or we could say Brahman becomes the world, right, Jagat and Jiva and the individual, right, rather than that there is no world and the individual is actually only Brahman, now not an individual. This is the classic statement of Shankara, attributed to Shankara, that I'll tell you in half a verse, which said in all verses, the God, Brahman alone exists, the world does not exist, and the Jiva and you are actually nothing but Brahman, right? So Brahman exists, the world doesn't exist, and the Jiva is really Brahman, so it doesn't actually exist, it's only Brahman, right? This is a different type of Vedanta. Brahman has become Jiva, the individual, and Jagat, and Brahman, and remains Brahman. Right, so that is a different. This is the background of this idea, and this is an amazing development. And we find it stumbled upon. It may be there theologically in other ancient religions, right? We're not going to deny, and people claim like that. There are hints for that, but at least whether or not it's there in texts and in prophetic statements, it's been stumbled upon by mystics. Right, by accident, sometimes quite accident, sometimes purposely, by renegade mystical traditions within religion, sometimes quite by accident, right, unintentionally, where one gets the experience when they realize that who they are is essentially not different than what God is, right, and maybe even more dangerous idea that what God is and who they are is essentially not different from what this world is. Right, and so there's many ecstatic utterances and statements of mystics and prophets and like that throughout the world, throughout history. But in many traditions, that's a dangerous thing to say, right? And it's gotten many people persecuted, or at least silenced, sometimes killed, right, for making such statements, right? Because it didn't conform to a particular view, right? In the general view is that what is that particular view? And we would consider classical Western. I have to be careful how I word it, because these categories, in so many of our classes we've talked about theism and monotheism, monism, polytheism, and panentheism, and pantheism, with all these different terms, and they're all very specific and very messy. They're super specific and mushy edge at the same time, so they're hard to use, right? But in general, let's say in a Western monotheistic traditions, right, you have a type of ontological dualism between creation and creator, right? God and nature, God and the world, and therefore even God and the self, God and the soul, God and the world, and the soul and the world, and the soul and God are insurmountably distinct, right? God is transcendent, right? And they're entirely other, right? And some have even defined religion as the relationship with the absolute other, right? So that's one. It's pretty. It's hard to overcome this perspective. I would say the hard divide between God and nature and the individual, right? We were Swami Bhajanananda Saraswati, never that God is God, God is God, the soul is the soul, individual soul is individual soul, and nature is nature, right? Or just say God is God and nature is nature. We can say like that, because we're also in the category of creature, right? We're also part of nature in some Western understandings, right? And never the twain shall meet, or never the three shall meet, as Swami Bhajanananda said, right? And if you try to make them meet, right, you may get excommunicated, right? And we mentioned last week, Atmaram gave us a brief introduction to the philosophy of Spinoza, right, where he got excommunicated by the Orthodox Jewish community, right, for a claim that God and the world are maybe not exactly completely unrelated, separate, eternally separate, ontologically separate categories, right? So how do you see what changes when you see the world, when you see that maybe the three may not be so distinct as we thought, right? So I have a let me see, this is a quote Swami Bhajanananda gave me many years ago, right, by M. Haryana, outlines Indian philosophy. This is, if you want a great introductory text summarizing the schools of Indian philosophy, this is a good one. There's a couple classics. There's some modern texts also. This is a classic text of describing, and he goes a lot into this incredible development. He believes in incredible development and the Indian tradition, where the self and Brahman, the self and God, the self and the reality, the idea that they're not completely separate, maybe not separate, maybe even identical, is quite something. So I'll read the verse here. I mean the excerpt from the text. The fusing of two such outwardly different but inwardly similar conceptions into one is the chief point of the Upanishadic teachings. What are these outwardly different? Thou and that, right? The individual and the universal and the cosmic. God, Brahman, the reality, and the individual soul, right? Or Brahman, the reality, and nature, another way to say it, right? Right, as they inwardly, they're outwardly distinct, but inwardly similar. And we'll see how they're inwardly similar momentarily. I mean, we've already seen about it, but the Devi herself will state that they're inwardly similar, right? The fusing of two such outwardly different but inwardly similar conceptions into one is a chief point of the Upanishadic teachings, and is expressed in the great sayings, the Mahavakyas, such as, he gives two Mahavakyas in translation: "Thou art that," Tat Tvam Asi, our Mahavakya here, and "Aham Brahmasmi," I am Brahman. That's another statement. I am that Brahman, right? Aham Brahmasmi, right? Or the equation Brahman equals Atman. You may have heard this. This is a philosophical equation, right? Right. The individual as well as the world is the manifestation of the same reality, and both are therefore at bottom one, right? There is, in other words, no break between nature and man, or between either of them, nature and man, and God, right? This is quite amazing, right? And this can get you in trouble in certain religious communities, right, and traditions, right? He illustrating this point in his own discussion in the book, and I first heard this from, I haven't, the book, like I said, this section of the book has been presented to me by Swami Bhajanananda, who's very excited, who got impressed by this way of explaining it, thinking about it. But he uses the example of the morning star, right? The morning star in the Greek tradition, what is it? Is it Hesperus? I believe Hesperus, the morning star. And there's also the and there, yes, and then there's the evening star, the morning star you see in the morning, and in the evening you see another star, right? And that is phosphorus, right? It's a more, I may be getting there's a morning star and evening star, one's in the east and one's in the west, but in the morning you see one star, in the evening you see another star. But it turns out they're the same star, right? So I sloppily presented the idea, right? But the two stars are actually the same star. You've seen it from two different perspectives, right? And when you realize, you're like, oh, it was always the same star. It was never two stars. I treated them completely different. My relationship was totally different with them, right? Brahman. So you have Brahman, man or humans, right? Brahman, jiva. Let's go beyond species even, right? Brahman, jiva, and nature, right? The three are aspects of one being, right? In Sanskrit, we would say Brahman, Jiv, Jagat, and Brahman, right? So so A, B, and C, right? A is B, and B is C. Therefore, A is C. But A is B, A is C. B is A, B is C. A is B. You know, it's like, so think about that. That's the idea, that if this is that, if I am Brahman and the world is Brahman, you know, it's like, and then who? It's not just A is B, B is C, and therefore A is C. Who's A, B, and C? In this verse, Ma Bhuvaneshwari is A, B, and C. Ma Bhuvaneshwari is Brahman. Ma Bhuvaneshwari is Jiva, the individual, is us. And Ma Bhuvaneshwari is nature, is the world we see, right? That's an overwhelm. And that's who is lovingly appeared to them, responded. And that's an amazing thing. That reality, who is Brahman, who is nature, and who is us, the individuals, appears as the individuals, appears to be an individual, or appears as individuals. We can flesh that out. It's she, it's her, Tam, right? It's she, and she has responded. She responds to our longing and calling. Who's longing and calling? Her longing and calling, isn't it? She's the you. She's the individual. She's the jiva. She's calling out to whom exactly? She's calling out to herself. It gets very mysterious and very overwhelming, very let's see here. I have another, let me go back to my screen here. So we're jumping ahead. I mean, I'll give you a hint or a peek in chapter 4 of the Devi Gita, where she herself will speak on Advaitic Vedantic perspective topics. Right. This is I'm just given the translation, more or less the translation from C. Mackenzie Brown. A few words I may have in typing it. I typed it out that I thought was better, but When we get there, we'll look at his. This may take. I included it because it may take some time as we're going slowly, 1 or 2 verses a week, slowly through the text. And by the time we get to the 4th chapter, maybe some years, maybe I don't know, maybe not, maybe we'll move quickly. Anyways, we should trust our own experiences about our nature as Satchitananda. We also trust our own experiences of how quickly we go through texts, no matter how much we hope we go through them quickly. But so we have to understand, we interpret these verses also with the help of the text at hand. And so the text at hand later on, the goddess herself says how to understand Tat Tvam Asi. So the translation, you are that, Tat Tvam Asi, indicates the oneness of the soul and Brahman. That's the opening statement. The same thing. You are the that is Brahman. You are the thou you are the you or thou that is the soul. That verse means the Devi herself is revealing the essential identity between the soul and Brahman. When this identity is realized, then one goes beyond fear. We'll spend a lot of time on these verses later, so I want to speak on each one of these. I love this section, but I won't. And one goes beyond fear and assumes my eternal nature, right? First, so when my eternal nature that is both Brahman and Jiva, right? The Devi's nature. First, one should comprehend the meanings of the individual words, and then the meaning of the sentence as a whole. Now, the word that refers to we normally say that refers to Brahman. She says that refers to I myself. That, the one we think of Brahman, is Bhuvaneshwari, the one is talking to them, refers to me, myself, I myself, O mountain, O Himalaya. This is well proclaimed. While the word you, tvam, or thou, refers certainly to the individual soul. Therefore, the two are identical by the word, are indicated, the identity of the two are indicated by the word are, or asi. So the wise say. So this is a big statement. The thou is me, the thou is individual soul, that's us, and the that is I myself, the goddess is saying. And the previous verse we're working on, the gods are claiming this to the goddess. Now the goddess is revealing, I am Brahman, and you are also Brahman. You and me are essentially not different. This is a big statement, right? Due to the opposed nature of the two expressed reference, thou and that, right? Their identity may not seem possible. It's grammatically impossible, the statement, as it stands. Thus one must adopt the secondary meaning implied by both terms. So this is a term we started in our very first class on the Devi Gita. We talked on different ways of interpreting text, and the vyapti and all these different things. And there's a literal meaning. There's there's literal meaning. There's primary meaning. There's symbolic meaning. There's secondary meaning. All these there's subtle meaning. There's hidden meaning, right? So here it's going. There's a primary and secondary meaning. The primary meaning, that you and that, they seem to be two different things, right? The secondary meaning, what do those things really represent? Let's dig into it. So it says, thus one must adopt the secondary meaning implied by both terms. That and you are fixed in the scriptures. Just pure, that the word that and you are defined in the scriptures. And we have to understand in the light of the Vedic revelation, is the Vedic argument. Just pure consciousness is a secondary meaning implied by both terms. Brahman is, the meaning of Brahman is pure consciousness, Satchitananda, right? And the meaning of Jiva is pure consciousness, Satchitananda. What is the difference? There seems to be differences. Maybe there only seems to be differences. Some schools to say that, or there may be very real, eternal, and unsurmountable differences by some other dualistic schools of Vedanta, right? But essentially, we are pure consciousness, and essentially, Brahman is pure consciousness, right? That's by the secondary meaning of thou and that, or Brahman and Jiva, is pure consciousness. Realizing their oneness by disregarding the non-essential differences One transcends duality, right? In the classical terms, we have a term that it's what is it? Nama-rupa, right? Or nama-rupa and guna, right? So we have name and form that seem to be changing, right? But in spite of all that changing, or we could say we have 3 states of consciousness: waking, dreaming, and dreaming. We have 5 koshas, however you want to define all these other things that seem to be attributed to us. But we have all those things, but we also have something that's unchanging, right? Beyond nama, rupa, and guna, right? The goddess or Brahman, we could start saying all kinds of things about it, but essentially it is only Brahman, right? So the nature of Brahman is pure consciousness, or Satchitananda, existence, consciousness, and bliss, and our nature is pure consciousness and bliss. Disregard nama rupa, at least temporarily, at least in meditation or realization, at least by conviction, then we realize one will transcend duality, right? And that transcendent duality has a value. The transcendent duality, and the up here itself says, we go beyond fear. Fear only comes when there's another, the Upanishad says. There is no fear when there is another. Fear comes only from the presence of the other, right? And one experiences, one assumes or experiences her essential nature. Her essential nature is quite wonderful. We're guaranteed, right? And then it says, it has a great line that those who have studied Sanskrit commentaries and regresses, this is that Devadatta, uses a secondary meaning, so it is taught. It gives an example. In the same manner, the sentence, this is that Devadatta, uses a secondary meaning, so it is taught. Devadatta is the go-to stand-in person. We probably say like Tom or John or Mary or something like that. We have to use an example of somebody. In Sanskrit literature, very often the go-to person is Devadatta, when you have to. So, but think about the statement, this is that Devadatta, right? So you have this and that, right? So this, if you have somewhere, somebody's talking about a Devadatta somewhere else, right? Somebody named Devadatta, right? And there's a guy here, it says, oh no, but that Devadatta you're talking about is this Devadatta who's right here in front of you. It's the same person. Right. So in that sense, it's using this as an example to say how we can, even in one sentence, this is that person. Thou art that. In that sense, we mean thou art that. The one that you think is Brahman, the one that you worship as Brahman or contemplate as Brahman or philosophize as Brahman, right, is also you. Right. But in these beautiful verses of the Devi speaking, we're speaking to the Devi. The gods are speaking to the Devi, right? You are Brahman, you are Jiva, and you are Bhuvaneshwari, right? This is so beautiful, I think. So the final verse, we ran out of time, but I do want to finish because next week we can actually talk. The Devi herself will start speaking. So I don't want to do one verse and then have her speak. we're going to get to it. What's the final? Oh, I didn't include the verse, but I'll just tell you the verse. So we'll go out of this. I forgot to copy it down. What time is it? Maybe actually, no, do I have it here? I'll tell you. Nama pranava rupaye namo hrimkara murtaye nana mantratmikaye te karunaye namo namaha. It's a very simple verse and very beautiful. We bow, it closes us all together. We bow, namo, we bow. Pranava rupiṇīm, you who are pranava. Pranava means Om. You are the one indicated by Om, or you are Om, right? Omkara, right? So the word Om has different indicators in the scripture. Sometimes it just says Om or Aum. Sometimes it's Omkara, means the sound Om or the unit Om. Sometimes it's the Sat Bija, right? The seed sound of truth. Or of being or existence. Sometimes it's or here it's the Brahma Bija, right? The seed sound of Brahman, right? And every tradition, every school of thought, every devotional school, sectarian school has some idea of what Om means and claims Om to mean the supreme, the absolute, the name of God, like this, right? Here it uses pranava. Pranava comes from the root to mean to shout or to sound. So prana means that which hums, something like that, right? The humming sound, right? Which makes a droning or humming sound. Om, we know that sound, right? So you are indicated by pranava, right? You are that pranava, the form of pranava. And pranava, as per the different schools, could indicate Ishvara. In the Yoga Sutra, it indicates Ishvara. In the Upanishads, it's from the three sounds of Om, Au, the three states of consciousness: waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep come. Also the past, present, and future, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, creation, sustenance, and destruction. All the different triadic experiences, manifestations are said to come from triadic sounds of Om, like this. And but here I think it means all that. But I think it means the non-dual Vedantic idea of Brahman, the indicator of Brahman. The Upanishads say that many times. It's known by the term Brahman. By Brahman, it is known. Focus the mind using the arrow that is Brahman, things like that, right? There's a verse that my Guruji, Swami Omananda, my sannyas guru, his name is Swami Omananda. So it shows you he's oriented towards Om, right? And we got an opportunity for me, with the first time, Ananda, myself, we're sleeping in the same room with him. And first thing in the morning, at Brahma Muhurta, 4 a.m, he sits up and chants, oh, he starts chanting. He says he only chanted 3 because we were still sleeping. Of course, we woke up to it. He don't want to wake us up. And normally he says it must be 20, usually it's 28 in the morning before going to bed, and 28 the first thing if I'm waking. There's numbers like this, some yogic meaning, right? So literally he starts his day immersing himself in the pranava mantra. And one time after my sannyas, I wrote him asking what is the nature of this mantra, and it's an important mantra for sannyasis. And so he wrote me back a verse, also a verse. It's both attributed to Shankara and attributed to a Vedic verse. I've now found it in a Shankara hymn, although it's attached to the pañca-koṣā-tiriktāṃ sometimes. And I've not found it in the Upanishads, in the Vedas either. But it's Om-kara-bindu-samyuktam nityam dhyayate yoganaha kamaram moksharam chaiva Om-karaya namo namaha. Something like that. I hope I got that right. Om-kara-bindu-samyuktam. To that Om, united with Bindu. Bindu is that the dot over the Om. That means the sound of Om goes into that Om, to the buzz that is Om, that sound from which sound comes, that moves into the transcendent, into the fourth state. Are the 3 states. The Bindu goes into the 4th state. Don't have time to fully unpack this, but Om-kara bindu samyuktam, that Om which is ever united with the Bindu, Om-kara bindu samyuktam nityam dhyayata yogina. The yogis always meditate upon it. The yogis are always meditate upon this Om along with Bindu. Kamaram moksharam chaiva. It gives kama. Gives kama means it fulfills desires, and moksha and liberation. Chaiva, and also liberation. Om karaya, to that Om mantra, that Om kara mantra, we bow. Namo namaha. Right. So it's considered a very important mantra in the Vedantic tradition. And it's in all the devotion traditions, we use it part of so many other mantras. So, but here it says, Om Kara, Namaha Pranava Rupanya. We bow to you who are Om, Brahman. Hrim Kara, Murtaye, and to who's in the form of the Hrim mantra. We heard this mantra when the gods meditated during their sadhana time on the Hirleka mantra. Right, this is a reference that we spoke quite a bit on the Hri mantra at that time. Hirleka mantra means a scratch or line on the heart, right? It's a code name for this mantra. Usually the mantra is not spoken out loud. It's a kind of a mantra that's used in sadhana and meditation for educational purposes, and with in the text we're using it. Hrim Kara. And Hrim is Shakti. And in the Devi Gita it says that this is the equivalent of pranava. It actually makes the Devi herself will say that. I believe that just like Om is for Brahman, for Devi, the mantra, the pranava mantra for Devi is Hrim. So this is a Shakti mantra, right? So this is a mantra of vitality and movement and motion and love and devotion, right? It's Shakti. So by saying you are Pranava, Rupa, and Hrim-kara Murti. You are Brahman, I mean, you are the Om, that you are that which is indicated by Om, and you are that which is indicated by Hrim. You are both. We could then say maybe Sagun Brahman, Nirgun Brahman, and Sagun Brahman, or you are Brahman and you are Bhuvaneshwari. You are the Devi. You are both, and that these verses mean that you are Brahman, you are the Devi, right? Nana mantratmikaye, Nana various mantratmikaye, and so many. You are the essence of so many mantras, unlimited mantras. I think he translated, you are composed of manyfold mantras. Right, your essence, the essence of all kinds of mantras, not just Om and Hrim, all kinds of mantras. Yesterday we celebrated the birth anniversary, the Advent anniversary, 187th anniversary of Sri Ramakrishna's Jayanti, and so I was remembering the hymn that Swami Vivekananda wrote to his guru, Arati hymn. There's a kandana, the arati when they use for arati, and then there's a sloka, a series of 4 verses with a final pranam verse, and it starts Om Hrim Ritam Tvam Achalo. Om Tvam Achalo. You are the one who's what? Indicated by what? By the words Om Hrim Ritam. Om is Brahman in this verse. Hrim is Shakti, the goddess. Brahman, Sagun Brahman, Nirgun Brahman, Shakti, Sagun Brahman, this world. You're the one that's Brahman, you're the one that's Shakti. And Ritam is a Vedic precursor to our word Satya, probably. It means Dharma, means truth, means rhythm, the way things are, the truth of the reality, the ontological reality, beingness is Ritam. Not exact word, but you are the one indicated by Om, Hrim, and Ritam, right? So the Devas are here looking up at Bhuvaneshwari Devi, saying, you are the one indicated by Om and Hrim and all mantras, right? And Sri Ramakrishna is looking up his guru, remembering his guru, you are the one indicated by Om, Hrim, and Ritam. Same mood, right? And then it says, Te karuna yue, you who are extremely compassionate, because this whole thing is her who, think about it, she's the infinite light of Brahman. She's the goddess that controls universes, of Bhuvaneshwari, with all her iconography. Now she's described as the goddess of the god. In these verses, the gods say she's the god of the Vedas. She's the god of, she's Vak. She's Lakshmi. She's Parvati and Sati. She's the mother of Skanda. All the, I mean, you're describing her glory, that you are Brahman, you are the world, you are Jiva, you are us, you are the one indicated by Vedic statements, right? That, and they're seeing her. Take the text emotionally as what it is, as like they're seeing her, right? She's that reality has responded to them. The reality who's the infinite beyond thought and conception, who's also them, who's also everyone, right? If you approach this, maybe we have to think, one of the things we learn when we study in text, one of the questions to ask is what's being said, right? And this is part of the our first talk we gave on Devi Gita. We talked about the thing. One of the things we're supposed to ask in a verse, what's being said? So we're trying to think what's being said here. There's all kinds of profound philosophical things I think being said here, right? And then we think, what is it saying to us? Not only like what do we think of it as, how we take it, that's personally important, but what it's intended to tell us. That infinite reality, which is everything, and the Devi Gita is going to reveal so many details about, Devi Bhajanananda reveals about the nature of Maha Shakti, the Maha Devi, the goddess, the supreme goddess of the universe, right? But here we're being that goddess, that supreme reality, is intimate, can respond to us, right? Is us and is intimate with us and can respond to us, right? And can teach us, right? Because the gods, she's going to say, what do you want? Right? Kamadam Mokshadam Shaiva, Om Karaya Namo Namaha, the verse I just chanted about Om. She gives us what we want, and she gives us what we really want, liberation, real freedom, right? Because she says, what do you want? He says, oh, a demon has come up. Can you kill him? Yes, okay, I'll do it. I'm giving next week's talk away, but right. But then he says, but what do you really want? Oh, we want union with you. With your essential nature. We want to know that. That is when next week, when the Devi Gita starts properly, when she then, this is her responding out of compassion. We talked about the nature of Shaktism. Probably a good working definition of Shaktism, of the Shakti tradition, is that the supreme reality is intrinsically dynamic and creative, right? A dynamic reality, Kali Brahman, right? In the last verse, it's they use Shri Brahma Murti, Brahman, which is Shri, and glorious and divine, right? Thakur would say that Kali and Brahman are non-different, right? So I mean, Kali and Brahman are non-different, right? So this is what's being said, right? Shaktism is this view that Kali and Brahman are not different. The reality is intrinsically dynamic. But this last line to me, Karuna yoe namo namaha, you who are compassion or compassionate, full of compassion, O thou who art full of compassion, we bow again, namo namaha, again and again, right? That divine reality, which is intrinsically dynamic, is also intrinsically compassionate, right? That means that supreme reality, which is intrinsically dynamic, Shakti, Brahman and Shakti, is relatable, right? Is our mother. We can call to her and she will respond. So they've called to her and she responded, right? And now next week, we'll see what she, at this point, after they've praised her with words in the scriptures and from with their own realizations, she will take with their realizations and give them further revelation. I believe one of the way we think of these discussions between disciple and guru, or disciple and deva in the scriptures, is that of revelation and realization, this beautiful play between the two. So we're at that moment, they've had profound realization expressed in their words, right? What they've seen so far. And then from that level of realization comes the next revelation, her next statements. We'll do that next week. So thank you very much for your kind attention, and for my little bit nervous babbling. We're a little bit overwhelmed from our pujas, and our prana is a little bit discombobulated to lack of sleep, but we gave it our best shot. Thank you for your kind of attention. Any questions or comments? Swamiji, that line of Sri Ramakrishna, that that again?
Brahmo ar Shakti obhed.
Brahmo
ar Shakti obhed.
This is a big statement. That's the best. That's also a perfect definition of Shaktism. Brahman and Shakti are not different, right? What I just said just now is that Brahman is intrinsically dynamic. That's what Shakti is. And Shakti is Shakti is dynamic, is dynamism, right? So Brahman is dynamic.
I think Ron Mali had a question, or
yes,
some
Ron
questions, or
I did have a question, but more like a thought, and then
thoughts are better than questions. They're less work for me. I get to enjoy them.
I don't know, what did I write? So we were discussing this whole idea of ontological idea of like non-distinction, right? So Brahman and Jiva, and how, I guess, in the book, what was it? Outlines of Indian Philosophy, right? That's discussed. And so then you have this huge leap that happens with increased the Brahmanical and the Sanskritization. And it seems that these two this idea of non-distinction that's almost embedded, that is in the Upanishads, that is discussed in various different forms, then moves to an area where distinction becomes the core principle, where people have access to this knowledge, right? I don't know if I'm making myself clear.
I think you're making sense. Yeah.
It's just, so we have this kind of deeper philosophical, esoteric belief system that talks about these core idea of non-distinction, that Shakti, Brahman is Shakti, Shakti is Brahman, and then we have Jiva, right? And that these are all reflections, and yet access to that knowledge at some point becomes extremely streamlined, for lack of a better word, right? So
do you mean that the esoteric knowledge has become accessible by streamlined, or what do you mean by that?
No, it hasn't. It has become more limited. So it's very only certain people. So with Sanskritization and
we have a hard time. We have to be careful not to imagine that we understand how these things developed and how they developed, right? This text is coming from it's taking a starting point. It's looking back, or it's pulling from the Upanishadic tradition specifically, right? It's a Sanskrit text like that, right? And the Upanishads are coming from a specific the Upanishadic community. They were particularly the which was a Sanskrit community, right? What was happening outside, what was happening with their correspondence in non-Sanskrit communities, right? Is this a mixing like that? Could be. Some people have done to do research. I'm not convinced either way from the research I've seen, right? I think it's a lot of ideology presented on the on like that. I don't know how it happened, right? But within the Upanishads, it's come out of the Upanishad tradition itself, right? The Upanishadic sages, this was esoteric knowledge. Was it widely known? It could have very easily been maybe widely known by everybody else, right? And only discovered by accident by the Upanishadic sages who have got tired of their fire rituals or something like this, and started meditating. It could have been, but I'm not quite sure if we can talk with certainty about that period of time, right? It's always been esoteric knowledge, but because it's like I see there. But it's also, I mean, this is maybe this is another way to think about it. Maybe there's evidence, and maybe I think there is evidence of this idea of this non-distinction, or of seeing God in nature and seeing ourselves as part of nature. That's probably spread throughout so many ancient traditions and all over in India like that, right? Right. This particular, so that may have been more common than we think, right? But but the Upanishadic sages, they were perhaps after something more than just that idea, right? Because many people think, if we have an experience like I know people, I mean, maybe we're these people, that I think I met, right? I'm being careful how I speak. Right, that have had such experiences, right, or grew up with such experiences, or such worldviews, right, of unitive experiences, or experiences of the divinity within nature like that. But the Upanishads and the Vedic tradition is pretty, it's restrictive for sure, but it's very distinct, right, and it has a philosophical how to say, I'm too jumbled to say it, has it comes to the Upanishads deal a lot with epistemology. How do we know what we know, right?
Mhm.
And so I've had experiences, maybe, or so at least, and you've had experience. We've all had some sort of experiences, and maybe those experiences have built our spiritual life and our orientation. But how do we know if we've experienced is true, right? You know, and so we should, like that verse from the Advaita Makarana, we should trust our own experience. I think that's a beautiful line because that makes it very grounded and trust our own experiences, right? But also it compares our own experiences, even that verse that I exist, I shine, I'm never not there. Well, that's similar to what the Vedas say, right? Because the Vedas are seen to be, because they're the idea of a scriptural tradition, right? Where of the pramana, the evidence of something of extraordinary how do you verify and know about things that are beyond sense experience, right? Otherwise, the idea that the Vedas, the Ashtika perspective, right, the Vedic perspective, which is definitely the Sanskritized Brahminical perspective, is that we know something is true about the transcendent, metaphysical, beyond senses, beyond mind realm, because the Vedas say so, right? That's the only way we can know that, right? And this text is within that tradition, is claiming that tradition, right? It's a goddess text and a world-inclusive text, and but it's going to use throughout and preference this perspective. We know this is true. We know where the Nanda for Nanda Brahma, because the Vedas say so. And by hearing this, because we hear the truth, Tat Tvam Asi, the Guru says it, and like that. And how do we know it's true? We know now. You know it. I've told you, right? Tat Tvam Asi. The scripture said it. I'm saying that the Devi said it in this text. The Upanishads say it. The Guru said it. My Guru said it. I tell it to you in that tradition. Now you know it. And if you're Ashtika, if you trust the Vedas, if you're a believer in the Vedas, that the Vedas are a true representation, a true revelation of transcendental knowledge, of this true higher knowledge, then now you know it, right? But the problem is we're not. I don't know if you're illumined, but maybe you're not illumined. I don't think I'm illumined, even though I know it. Right? I've had somebody I believe illumined tell me this again and again. Here we are, spilling coffee on myself as I start my talk. This is my big illumination today, right? Right. So actually, when we get to these verses in the fourth chapter, I can't wait to talk about these verses, right? Because then we get into particular very interesting development of people who influence Swami Vivekananda and some important Vedantic thinkers that go into it. If we know this, we trust the sources. If we're Ashtika and believe the Vedas, right? Because like if I tell you this, and you're not Ashtika, let's say you don't accept the Vedas and authority, it's like, well, maybe it's true. And then you think, oh, isn't it impressive how some ancient people believe that the soul is non-different from Brahman? It becomes an artifact in a certain sense, a fascinating thing about religious tradition. But if it's our religious tradition, we believe the Vedas are saying Vedas have the authority to reveal this truth to us. And we hear it, we now know it, but we're not awakened to it, right? So when we get there, they'll be describing there's reasons for this. There's a couple of reasons that our mind is not illumined, is not pure, right, by sattva guna. So there's sadhana, and the purpose of sadhana is to illuminate the mind, to make it sattvic. A sattvic mind, knowledge shines forth easily. The truth of these statements shine forth easily. And the other thing is that we believe it, but not convinced. There's doubts. And therefore we bring logic and reasoning and discussion and meditation, different type of meditation, to remove doubts, right? We do sadhana to illuminate, to purify the mind, to make it sattvic, and then we remove doubts through reasoning. That's the classical sadhana is given, right? And so when we look at people outside the Vedic tradition, out in other countries also, in other indigenous traditions and like this, that have very similar philosophy, right? We still need to, we still need to purify the mind and remove doubts. Even if the tradition tells us, our tradition can tell us, we're all one with nature. And we're all part of God, and nature comes from God, the great mother, however we want to word it, like different ways to word it like this, right? We can grow up with it, right? and wonderful to grow up. How blessed it would be to have grown up with this. I didn't grow up with this, right? This is revelation. This is shocking revelation to me in high school when these ideas were first presented. These exciting ideas, right? I didn't grow up exactly with this. Like, imagine how wonderful would it be to grow up, right? But the symptom, according to the Devi in the 4th chapter, is that one completely transcends fear and one rests eternally in my essential nature, right? That type of experience is still seems to be for a few who make it, a few who have the mental purity, remove mental doubt, have had maybe according to the text, lifetimes of preparation, right? Like when we hear these things, either we hear it revelatory through a text or through a guru, right? Or in our ambient culture where it's available from our grandma, right? It's like we may know it, however we hear it, we don't really know until we're ready to know it, right? And that's what the Devi is appearing, and she's giving this instruction. I mean, as per the tradition, But anyways, but it's getting late, and I'm talking myself, and I'm gonna dig myself a hole in this one. So I think you know what I mean, and I know what you mean, and you're right. I'm today in this particular hat with this, the way I've tied my turban today, right? For giving a class on Devi Gita, I have to argue from the perspective of Devi Gita with those presumptions, but you're probably right. Okay. Jaima.
Jaima, thank you so much.
Any other comments? Easier ones?
Michael?
Yes, thank you.
Michael.
So,
yes,
Namaste, Swami. Thank you. So, hopefully, I'll just talk myself in a circle, and you can just come in at the end.
Okay.
So, in this Shakta Advaita tradition, the mother is covering herself and potentially revealing herself, and the nature of liberation is to realize this identity that you were describing of the individual self with mother, with Brahman. But if that's the case, then when we say that mother is covering herself, it seems like that becomes equivalent to the statement that I'm just deluding myself, because we've just equated those things.
Yes.
And
So,
then,
okay,
yeah,
go ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead.
But yeah, so then that sort of makes the Shankara Advaita teaching and the Shakta Advaita teaching more like differences of perspective than conflicting statements.
Some would hold, there are people who hold that the differences between them may not be, although very real, aren't that real. So and I tend to be a little, because I skirt between these two by temperament. Right, I am a committed Shakta, but I'm also I'm a Vedantic sannyasi in a Vedic line, right? So we have our own way of understanding everything. That's that has no problem. Maybe it's a double think, or maybe it's just different language. I'm also the devotee of Ramakrishna who held that, who said that both two opposing views are not opposing, may not necessarily be opposing, but actually two aspects of of a continuum of reality, right? Which I think these verses may be hinting at also, right? But I think one thing that helps me. This may not be the answer, may be wrong, right? But it helps me overcome glitchy. Maybe I just reword it until the problem goes away. That could be a problem. That could be what's happening too. But the way I understand it, the way I present it, is not that like when we say that there's no difference in one sense between Brahman, the goddess, and ourselves. It doesn't necessarily. It does mean we're Brahman, but in what sense? We're still nama, rupa, guna, upadis. We're Brahman plus upadis, right? Right. So it's like Bhuvaneshwari created the world. I didn't. Right. So in one sense they say, oh, I'm Bhuvaneshwari, I created the world. That's a particular bhava people can have. It's a dangerous bhava, I think. It can make you go a little crazy, right? Because it's not unless you're completely pure, we can't make this statement. If you want to see an example of that type of ecstatic, devotional, radical non-dualism, look at the writings and poetry of Swami Ramatirtha, He's one of the Swamis that came to this country in 1903 or something like that, where he's like, it was like, oh, it's by my grace the wind blows, right? Oh, look to see the shower, the wind, the clouds have come to bathe me. It's like, and is he being egotistical? Did he really think he was lost in an ecstatic rapture, right? Whether he, but if people think, oh, I'm controlling the weather, that's maybe a sign of mental illness, not a spiritualization. It was a bhava for him. He was so immersed in this, right? So I think probably safer than the same I am God in that sense is to say, in the way I word it devotionally, I believe the teaching of the Srimad Bhagavatam, it's implicit in the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is where I get a lot of my devotional, non-dualistic devotion, yet devotional understanding, is I believe the Srimad Bhagavatam is a non-dualistic devotional text. Right? I think it's well established as that. Is that God has become, not that I'm God, but that God has become me and everybody else. He's acting, she's acting all the parts. And my own guru, Swami Vishnudevananda, used this language. And he would say, this is esoteric, this is Guru Vakya, right? This is esoteric. I'm going to say it over Zoom and over Facebook, apparently, right? I've said it before, that you look around and says, this is secret teaching, right? That unseen power, that Mahashakti, is playing as the individual soul. This is his highest teaching. This is the highest teaching. The one being is playing all the parts, including ours, right? She's the one speaking through my voice. She's the one hearing through your ears, right? So it's not that I'm creating ignorance. She's creating ignorance as me, not that I'm creating ignorance. So it's still, the benefit of this, it still puts the blame on her. I'm joking, obviously, but last week we said that, that she we're an illusion, it's her fault. She's playing all the parts, and she'll remove her covering. She makes us means she herself through us goes through various sadhanas to purify consciousness, to remove doubt, established like that. Also, there's a thing, as you said, we have to realize that we're not different from Brahman and from the world and from the goddess. That's not everyone's goal also. Right, there's different spiritual goals, right? This is the goal presented as the highest goal in the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam, right? It describes different levels of bhakti. The highest level of bhakti is essential non-difference with her essential nature. That's not everyone's goal, right? And we're not here to guide people and try to convince people a particular goal, right? A satrological goal, right? But that is the goal of the express goal, by stated by the goddess in this text, right? So we're presenting those teachings. We have to be a little careful to do it. We don't want to offend anybody and step on any philosophical coattails and things like that, or offend anybody's devotional or philosophical sentiment. But we're presenting the teachings of a text, an important text, a part of the development of the beautiful development of the goddess tradition. So. Anything else? Sorry. Hari Om. Jai Ma Kali. Anything else? What do we got? Vivekananda, anything on your side?
No questions. No other questions posted. Will we have good darshan of?
Oh, there he is. Vijay. Jai Ma. So actually, Swamiji reminded me just before class to remind you of our 20th anniversary.
30th.
30th. Wow. I need a good night's sleep. I realize I've been just tripping over. I think one thing and my tongue says completely different. Our 30th anniversary, Kali Mandir's 30th anniversary, we're celebrating on Memorial Day weekend, right? And we're celebrating, as far as we know, the main celebration will be on the Sunday before Memorial Day. 29th, Swamiji, is that correct?
I think 28th.
28th.
May 28th.
And it will probably be an all-day program. We'll have pujas in the morning, devotional singing. And we'll also have lots of music and dances, Indian dances. As far as we know, we'll have some wonderful singers. Ram Priyadas will be here, we believe, and so some others. It should be a wonderful, wonderful time. We have a neighbor that has an amphitheater, so if we can manage it, we'll have an outdoor concerts, music festival, dance festival, as part of the celebration, as well as food, of course, free of charge. And so please do come. It's a big deal. Ma has been we're very emotional thinking about, when she came and how she came and what has happened in those 30 years. So we have tried our best, our group of devotees here, to keep the worship going unbroken, and knowing that in that environment, magic will happen. And we know many of you, all of you know probably that magic has happened, maybe in your life also, by Ma's grace. So we really want to celebrate this milestone. And we're celebrating this year's Usha's 80th birthday and Ma Dakshineshwari's 30th birthday. So it's a great year. So please mark it on your calendar. And I know people have travel plans. We want to mention it before we've lost a few people that already made plans. Like, oh, I would have known 2 weeks ago. So hopefully you haven't made travel plans, or if you don't live near us, make a travel plan. It'll be a nice time to come if you'd like to come. Also, weather is nice in Laguna at that time, so it's a nice time to come. Summers are sweet here, so you get to see. Om. All right, dear ones, good night. Next week, we'll see. The Divine Mother will speak with the voice of a cuckoo bird, respond full of compassion, and we'll see what she says as the beginning, the beginning of the new section of this beautiful and important text. Thank you. Hari Om Tat Tvam. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om. Jayama Alex, Jayama Shambhala, Elijah, Ranmali, Michael, Durgadasi, Ananda,
Jayama.
Jayama Giriji, the little one. Hi, little one.
Sundari Atmaram Yogamaya.
Atmaram is there somewhere? Atmaram, Sundari.
Hey.
Oh, there you are. Oh, there's another person there.
Hey,
Yogamaya.
he's holding up two hands.
Yeah.
Does that mean he's more Dvaitic?
I think so. Must be. Jayama.
Oh, two as one. So
We have 3 people. It's pretty good. I'm happy to see. Jayama. Very exciting.
hey.
All right, I'm getting a bunch of dings from Swami Govindananda from Benares. So we'll see what poem he sends. Poems every night. He's quite a prolific writer. So we'll go through. I'm sure we'll get a bunch of inspiring, either complaining poems or inspiring poems. We'll see we'll see how India is going this week. Jayama. Adios.